93, 93, 93. This is the month I should renew from IshouldRenew.com. Today I will speak on what it means to be a free thinker. And I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I know y'all are out there blessing the world with your presence, being fly, being classy, being top of class. I already know y'all out there making shit happen. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time. So let me go ahead and put the background music on and we'll get through this. 1 second and we're off. All right. Anyway, what motivated me, I see you, Josh, 93, 93, 69. What motivated me to go ahead and put out this information is, well, I spent a little weekend in LA. So I was able to visit Devil's Gate, as I usually do. So it opened up some chambers within me, and I'd like to give some insight as to how my thoughts are flowing as of now, moving forward on the 13th day, on the 13th degree, which is a degree of death, taking us into the mysteries of Scorpio, as we know as the 8th house. What's up, precious mother love? One, salute to you. Salute to all the energy in DC, District of Columbia. I appreciate you. Shout out to the queen. So essentially what I want to emphasize here is when we consider ourselves free thinkers, because as we are in the age of Aquarius, the new age, the new aeon, the age of enlightenment, whatever we would like to call it, the Kali Yuga. It is imperative that we free our minds, not just free our minds, because that's more so like the subconscious, but also free our ability to think vastly. And what I mean by this is why we study all things and converse with all people. Because if you consider yourself supreme, you must be free in your ability to navigate not just this planet, but also your thinking patterns and the patterns of others. meaning you have to be able to adapt and blend into the patterns of others more so than them adapting and blending it into your patterns. What I'm saying here is, we cannot, as a Muslim, for example, go to a Christian and expect them to convert to our way of life because we feel our way of life is supreme. And we're going to use the Quran against the Bible, so on and so forth. This is what we've been doing for ages. It's not going to work. What's up, Sandra? What's up, Sandra? What's up? What's up? What's up? All right, all right, all right. So essentially, what we have to do is we have to come to people on their level, not to necessarily bring them up to our level, because everyone has a specialty in their thinking patterns, depending on your particular zodiac sign, amongst other things. So based on how our astrology lines up, among other things, because I don't want to put it all within the realm of astrology, but it plays a huge factor. Depending on how your stars and your planets line up, this will give you your unique perspective of life. Everybody has a unique perspective of life. So we cannot disregard anyone's unique perspective of life. This is why we have many different people that you can say acknowledge many different gods, many different goddesses, many different ways of life, many different traditions, many different religions. Everybody has their own thing. So instead of us trying to find out, well, which one of these things is my thing, you may be the person that has to relate to them all. So you are not the person that picks and chooses any path. You embrace all. That includes the light, that includes the dark. That's what makes a person universal. It's because you are willing to travel the paths of light as well as the paths of dark. Not for people to become like you, but for you to understand the fullness of not only them, but also yourself, because a piece of you relates to each and all things, because we all come from the same source. We come from the same source, then we begin to spread out and become unique and different from one another. So on a mainstream, what we do is we utilize our differences against each other. So this is what essentially competition becomes. Is one school against this school, one city against this city, one state against this state, one country against another country, so on and so forth, right? So what happens is, it's easy for us to say, okay, well, we're over here, they're over there. It's easy to cause separation. It's easy to cause confusion because we all think that we are different, right? What's up, Gaming King? What's up, Keenan? 93. Salam. What's up, Dank Wizard? What's going on? What's going on? Yeah, I see her. It's a lot more people in the house because, I know we usually be going live about 3 a.m. People still be asleep, but yeah. I see, most people are up. So salute to everybody. So what we're speaking about once again is what it means to be a free thinker. This is our ability because it is a special ability. It is the equivalent to a superpower. If we want to be honest, it is the equivalent to a superpower. When you can actually adapt and blend into someone else's consciousness instead of just, you can say, expressing your own. We all have the ability to express our own consciousness. That's not necessarily a challenge. The challenge is getting other people to relate and understand our perspective and where we are coming from. That's why we do our due diligence. That's why we study. That's why we get our experimentation on. We are doing all these things Because we understand we cannot judge a person without taking a walk in their shoes. So I can't judge the Christian if I'm Muslim and I never been Christian. Can't judge the Muslim if I never been Muslim. Because I have no idea what it means to walk that path. I have no idea what it means to pray 5 times a day if I never had to pray 5 times a day. However, there's a common thread between all of these religions, traditions. There's a common thread that connects them all. So when we understand the common thread, we don't get weighed down by the consciousness. What I mean by that is you have the collective consciousness, and the collective consciousness has a very vast weight. Meaning collectively, there's a lot of people that are religious. There's a lot of people that are spiritual. So when you consider yourself something, I'm this or I'm that, you take on that weight, you take on that karma. You are essentially merging with that collective consciousness that also agree with that. So you have a personal conscious, then you have the collective conscious, which is, you can say, the consciousness of everybody who agrees with this particular ideology, with this particular manifestation. However, in order to be a free thinker, we must also embrace what we call the unconscious. We have what is called the superconscious, aka the higher self. But then we have the unconscious, aka the lower self, which is our dark side, which is our shadow, which is our alter ego. That's essentially where we find the common threads, because that's where we go to find the origin of things. So when we speak about going within, everybody says you have to go inside yourself, but they never tell you what that is. What's up, Oshun? Or you have to go within. What the fuck does that mean? What they're trying to communicate is you have to go inside your unconscious mind. That's what it means to go within. Like, within what? If consciousness is the only reality, that means you can only go inside your own consciousness. And within your consciousness, you have something called the unconscious. You can say there's 5 consciousness. You got magnetic consciousness, infinite consciousness, super consciousness. Right? There's many different levels of consciousness. So we exist on all of these levels. We're just not aware until we put in the work to become aware. And that's how we expand our thoughts. We expand our thinking to become free in thought, because that allows us to comprehend higher states of consciousness as well as lower states of consciousness. Meaning, if we, you can say, live our lives trying to be like Jesus, we have no idea what it means to be like Satan. Which is why we're always trying to fight against it. We're trying to fight against the shaitan, the adversary within us, because all of these attributes are within the consciousness. This is not anything external unless you take these things literally. However, if you understand this to be a psychological exercise, these are talking about states of consciousness that you already possess. So it ain't something that you can avoid. We can try to avoid it. We can try to act like we are not beast within, that you don't have the ability to kill if you needed to. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. If it came down to it, you're going to take a life if you had to. That may not be a thought that you think about on a day-to-day basis. You may not think ever about taking somebody or harming anybody whatsoever. That may not be something that crosses your mind until you are in a situation where you have to think of these things and you have to perform. Because that was already within you. It was just in the unconscious. It was a part of yourself that, or a part of ourselves, because this is all of us. It is the part of us that we choose to ignore, as we say, what's in the back of our head. Because we get so caught up into the subconscious, which is our personal emotions. We get so caught up as to what's going on in our personal lives and our personal environment. This is what allows the beast to grow in power, and we don't acknowledge it until we're faced with a situation that forces us to acknowledge it. And that's all essentially trauma is. So instead of having to wait for a situation to pop up that forces you to learn what's inside of your own unconscious, as a magician, as someone who works with hidden or subtle forces, you are essentially allowing yourself to release that energy without it having to be some type of external stimulation involved. You don't have to wait till you get into a bad relationship. You don't have to wait till you get into a situation that is negative to you before these energies manifest themselves to you. And we go through all this turmoil with people, places, things, and events just to come to the ultimate realization that all I was doing was releasing my own psychic forces that have been building up within me. And then they come out when the subconscious is triggered. That's how an argument turns into something so much more. Because all this extra energy comes out that has been building up. So when we periodically release this energy, because we acknowledge it, like this energy needs to be released periodically. Because if I let it just fester, then I'm going to have an issue on my hands. This is just the nature of consciousness. When you know who you are, you understand that this is just like having children, having a pet, having something you have to look after for. You have to tend to it. You have to keep it on the up and up, or it's going to cause you a problem. So when you have pets, you take your dog, for example, out on walks. You take it outside to relieve itself, because if you don't, it's going to relieve itself inside of your home, which is not going to be good for you. So, okay, let me take this dog out for a walk so it can relieve itself. It can do whatever it needs to do so that it doesn't have to do all these things within the home. That's just another way where this is what we have to do. This is just a metaphor of what we have to do for our own consciousness. And you understand it's not always going to be a pleasant situation. This is what it means to work with darkness. This is what it means to work with, you could say, the darker forces. Meaning it's not always pleasant. It's not always going to be a pleasant experience, but it is a necessary experience. So this is why a person would not really want to work with dark forces, because it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be pleasant. And who's trying to have an unpleasant experience? Except those who seek to understand things before they actually have to occur. You can understand death before someone dies close to you, and then you're struck with grief, forcing you to understand it. The deeper you go into the unconscious, you can understand all those so-called dark or negative emotions more than someone else who only understands it because they've been through it. Because we all like to attach ourselves based on our experience. Yeah, I've been through that. Yeah, I've been here, done that. We all like to base our reality off of what we've been through, what we've actually seen, and what we actually heard. But that's just the forefront of the consciousness. What about what's occurring on the unconscious? What about what's occurring on the subconscious? Meaning the things that you don't see or hear physically, but they are still producing a sound. We spoke about that before. Just because you don't see thoughts or hear thoughts doesn't mean they don't produce sound. Just because you don't see yourself thinking, just because you don't see yourself feeling, doesn't mean that it does not produce a sound. All of these things produce a sound. Your emotions produce sound. Your desires produce sound. Thoughts, sound. And then on a physical plane, when we actually do open up our mouths, when we actually do express ourselves, all these things produce sounds. And our goal is to create a harmonious song that is pleasant to the ears of others. That's all we can ever hope for, is when you are in the presence of others that your presence is pleasant. And it ain't because what you're doing for anyone else is for what you're doing for yourself. Meaning the work you're doing for yourself allows you to understand people more without having to be what they are. Essentially, this is what allows you to understand something like Christianity without actually having to be a Christian. How to understand Islam without having to be an actual Muslim. How to understand Judaism without having to be an actual Jew. But however, you have understanding of these things because you don't have to be any of these things because, as I said earlier, there's a common thread or denominator between all of these sciences. All of these sciences correlate. It's just a different way of expression depending on the people, because people are different. Some people are going to be drawn to the Bible. Other people are going to be drawn to the Quran. Other people are going to be drawn to the Torah, and so on and so forth. And that's based on their pre-configurations, which is based on their astrology. So based on your astrology will determine what type of literature that you're drawn to. And based on the type of literature you're drawn to, you can find the truth. And everybody can. Everybody is drawn to different literature. But all of this literature will lead you to the same conclusion if you understand what you're doing, which is how to unite all of the worlds. Because if you unite all of the worlds, you can unite the people. We can't unite with the people if we don't know who they are, if we don't know their history, if we cannot help them to understand who and what they are. Fuck who we are. Can you help someone else understand who they are? You can know who you are all you want. But that isn't necessarily constructive to the next person who don't know who they are. They can acknowledge your godhood. They can acknowledge you as the goddess. But the goal is to get them to acknowledge themselves as the god or the goddess. What's up, Healthy? Wealthy Frequency 93. 93. So this is what it means to be a free thinker, meaning you have the ability to help people understand their own godhood. Fuck trying to acknowledge yours. As long as you acknowledge yourself as the divine, then that's all that matters. But can you get someone else to see what you see in a different way that you see it? See, that's the kicker. It's one thing to try to get people to understand things in the way that we understand. For example, for me, just because I acknowledge astrology is not going to be the way that everybody learns this truth. So this is why I had to do my due diligence to learn all these other stuff, all these other things, all these other sciences. I'm like, okay, that's not enough. That may have been enough for me, That may have been how I opened up the door to see hidden realities. But that's not going to be everybody's story. So I have to learn more things. Not just for my sake, but for those who may be coming from a different path. I need to be able to relate to this path. I can't be comfortable with my own path as if that's going to be everybody's answer. It's not going to be everybody's answer. I have to free my thinking. So no matter how a person presents themselves, I'm like, okay, let me show you the godhood within your own way of life, instead of trying to show you my way of life, which may not resonate with you. Everybody is not going to acknowledge 93, for example. But you will acknowledge something within this world. And whatever that something is, I have to understand as well. Meaning if all I knew was 93, I wouldn't be useful. Like that's just the supreme answer to everything. Not really. It may be how I see things, but people see things differently. So if I can't understand their way of life, then I'm not useful just because I understand my own. So I should be able to talk to a Christian about Christ, to be able to talk to a Muslim about Muhammad, to be able to talk to a Jewish man or woman about Abraham, so on and so forth. I'm just naming the major ones. We know that we got all type of traditions. We can go into the African traditions, Chinese traditions. You know, people are very vast. There's a lot of languages. There's a lot of people. And we can't wait for them to relate to us because they're going to be taking their sweet ass time. That's what it comes down to. People are moving at their own pace. They're going to take their sweet ass time trying to understand you. So when you understand that you have the ability to cause a quickening in somebody else's life, what normally would have took 30 years may only need to take 3 years if you play your cards right. So you just advanced time 27 years because you helped someone else to unlock the secrets within their own consciousness, which was a completely different way than how you unlocked yours. This is what it means to manipulate time. You see, that's time manipulation. You just sped up time within somebody's consciousness. Because time is mental anyway. We already know time is within. Well, what is within? Okay, this has to be the unconscious then. Time is a subconscious or unconscious phenomena, meaning it is internal. So time must be manipulated from the consciousness. It ain't looking at the clock or not looking at the clock. So essentially, every time you speak the truth, every time you go out and you make it your desire to help the next person to realize their godhood, and the only way to do that is you must know what they know, and you must know more about what they know. You must know more about other people's history and culture than even they know. For example, on the West Coast, the deity Guadalupe is very prominent. You go to LA, you're going to run into Guadalupe. So before I even knew her name or who she was, I still seen her before I even acknowledged her. It was still an impression made on my subconscious, like, oh yeah, I don't know who that is, but I know that image when I see it. Just by being in Los Angeles, that image will be embedded into your subconscious. Just like those crosses are going to be embedded into your subconscious. The Church of Scientology is going to be embedded into the subconscious. So there's many different things that are embedded into the subconscious just because we see it on a daily basis. So whatever city you're in, there are certain symbols that you are seeing on a daily basis, depending on what traditions and what religions have a stronghold in your city. And it's different for every city. But these are symbols that we are exposed to continuously. That you may not ever go into that church. You may not ever go into that Masonic lodge. You may not ever enter into these temples or these masjids or these synagogues. You may not ever enter into those worlds. But it is still necessary, or we must still acknowledge what they are and what they mean for our own sake. First and foremost, you want to know what these things mean so that they don't play on your consciousness or your subconsciousness and you don't know what's going on. You want to be at least able to point out all the deities that have a stronghold in your city through the symbolism. So you just want to acknowledge the fact, okay, these are the strongholds in my city because these are the symbols I see in abundance. So these symbols have power. So I need to educate myself on this imagery because this is the environment, this is the atmosphere that I place myself in. So in order for me to advance in this environment, in order for me to manipulate this environment, I must understand the imagery. I must understand the symbolism and the effect it has on my consciousness and the consciousness of others. Because if I don't, I'm doing myself and everybody else an injustice. Because that's most likely when I run into other people, they most likely are going to acknowledge one of these symbols or one of these imageries, one of these glyphs. They're going to adhere to something. And even if they adhere to nothing, they still know something about something. So the more I educate myself on where other people may potentially be coming from, the more I have the ability to relate to them. As opposed of trying to get them to understand where I'm coming from, which really don't even have to be a part of the conversation whatsoever. It's just showing that you have respect for other people's tradition. That actually may encourage them to want to know about what you are. Not because you told them, just because they see the amount of respect that you have for their culture, for their tradition, for their religion. That's something that most people are not used to. Most people are not used to somebody just having a respect for their way of life, and they're not a part of that way of life. Or they're trying to, people are trying to compete or convert, and it just becomes a thing where no one's really trying to agree. People are just trying to step over each other. We're trying to, outdo each other. When that competitive spirit becomes creative, you look for creative ways to relate to others instead of competitive ways. And this is essentially is going beyond the master teacher or the 33 into the 44th degree. This is what it means to go into the 44th degree. Because the 33rd degree represents the master teacher. And we all go through that stage where we can teach what we know. We can teach our religion, our tradition, because it is our way of life. We know it in and out, forwards and backwards. So it's pretty easy to let people know what you're into because you know everything about it. And that's essentially what a master teacher does. A master teacher shares their expertise, whatever that may be. So if you know about health, you're going to help other people understand health. If you understand money, you're going to help other people to understand money, economics. If you understand politics, you will help other people to understand politics, so on and so forth. That's what it means to be a master teacher. That means you are a master or an expert of a said field, to the point where you can teach others how to become experts and masters at this field just like you. So you're able to essentially duplicate yourself. That's what it means to be a master teacher. You essentially are able to duplicate yourself. And over here in the West, that's why that's the final degree, because everybody wants to be an influencer. Everybody wants followers. Everybody wants to duplicate themselves, essentially. Everybody wants to see themselves outside of themselves. That's essentially why that's the last degree over here, where the 44 is not acknowledged. Because once you get to the 44, now it's not about what you can teach. In order to heal people, you must understand their ailments. You must understand their illness. Now it's no longer about you. Now it's no longer about you. Now you must understand their disease. Now you must understand their discomforts. Now you must understand what plagues them, what ails them. Now it's all about the other person. You must understand the contents of their consciousness, because again, if it's about healing, you need to know these things. It's not enough to be a master or expert in your said field. You have to understand where they're coming from now. You must understand their culture to like, okay, I can see where you may have did a little bit too much of that or too little of this. But you must be able to ask the right questions. You can't ask the right questions without being informed about what takes place within these said cultures. And again, when you are the master healer, many different people are coming to you, not just the people that acknowledge what you acknowledge. You can say if you can heal a person, they don't give a fuck what you know or what you acknowledge. They want to be healed. So it ain't about what you can teach them anymore. Like, oh, this is a healer. Okay, I'm going to the healer. Not to be taught, to be healed. You see, it's two different worlds. Because a lot of the supreme healers don't even do it for money. Like if we just look throughout history and look at the people that added on to our level of understanding of medicine, a lot of these men and women back in the old days didn't even ask people for money. They did it just strictly because they wanted to. Because they were beyond being a master teacher. They had evolved into the 44th degree. See, there isn't a lot of teachers who are willing to teach for free. People want to be paid for that, right? That's why a doctor is not a healer. See, this is why these terms matter. Just because a person is qualified to be a doctor doesn't make them a healer, because a doctor essentially doesn't know how to heal. They can prescribe antibiotics, pharmaceuticals. But they are not going to take their actual hand and manipulate no energy. And this is what I'm saying. They're not going to, you can say like the Christ, like the 33, they're not going to just heal by touching. They could just touch a person and it makes a person feel better. They're not going to be able to do that. Because now you have to know how to manipulate your chi and manipulate the chi of others, which is something a doctor doesn't know how to do. So that doesn't qualify a doctor to be a healer, because a doctor knows nothing about pranayama. And this is why the 44 stays in the East and it never made it over here to the West, because we still don't acknowledge pranayama over here, which is necessary to understand if you're going to heal anything, including yourself. Meaning you have to know that at least as a basis. How to manipulate chi. In order to manipulate it, you have to acknowledge it first. You have to acknowledge that it's actually valid. But over here, it's considered a pseudoscience, amongst other things. So even a master teacher over here ain't really teaching about chi and pranayama. It's not teaching people how to be. Just because you go to a meditation class or a yoga session, that's not teaching you how to heal someone else by manipulating their chi. Because you have an understanding of how it works. I guess the closest we may get to this is like Reiki practitioners. Reiki is a thing now. However, Reiki is more so the Japanese version of chi. See, this is how it pays to know the differences between the words and where the words come from. One culture says chi. Another culture says kundalini. Another culture says voodoo. These are all the same things, just different words that connect us to different cultures. So I say all this to say, in closing, in summary, just building on, I've been speaking about the master healer a lot anyway. Evolving beyond the master teacher. Evolving beyond your own personalized specialty. Because that's the only way you're going to be able to relate to others. You have to expand your consciousness to. Another way of saying this is the yogis were able to expand their aura up to like 20 feet. To the point where you can walk into the same room as them and you can feel their presence like they're right up on you. You can feel them as if they right up on you, but they way over there. We have the ability to do these things, But you see, that requires you to be able to manipulate your chi. That's not going to come from teaching, because that's activating sound. When we teach, we are utilizing sound or a different form of sound. But when you are healing, you can say you're also using sound too. But that sound is even more subtle than what you can reverberate through your vocal tones. So essentially, you're working with an even more subtle energy. So you see, as you evolve, the energy gets more subtle. Because you start with the master number 11, which is the master seer, which you can say is the opening of the third eye, which is light. Your exposure to light beyond the ultraviolet and infrared spectrum. Then you evolve into the 22, the master builder, which is more like operative masonry. Being able to manipulate the earth. So you go from the 11, manipulation of light, to the 22, manipulation of the earth. Being able to actually do things with the hands. whether it's through technology, being able to manipulate technology, or to manipulate stone, to manipulate some type of earth substance. So you can say technology is working with crystals. So a master builder is either working with stone, building homes, building structures, or you're working with the crystals within technology and making things happen that way. Content creation, so on and so forth. You can say that's what it means to be the master builder. Now that makes you a content creator. You know how to manipulate the crystals within your cell phones and within your laptops and computers. You know how to manipulate it to get it to reflect the spectrum of sound that you're trying to reflect. So before you become the content creator or manipulating the crystals within the technology, you open up the third eye to even acknowledge that can be done at all. So upon the opening of your third eye, you realize, I can actually utilize technology and create things differently. It's one thing to be able to draw something on a piece of paper. Now I'm going to utilize technology. Now I'm going to do these things digitally. Because when I do a digital, I don't know why I'm having a hard time saying digital for whatever reason. Once I start doing things digital, now I can share it on social media. Now other people can see it other than me just taking a picture of what I drew physically. Now I can do things. I can take something that I actually drew physically, took a picture of it, then further manipulate it via technology. That's what technology allows you to do. So you can draw it with your hand, snap a photo, then further elaborate in the digital world things that you probably couldn't do, or it would just take a lot longer to do physically. So it ain't that you couldn't do it physically, but it would take forever to do it. Now you can, something that would take forever could be done in a relatively short amount of time. And that's essentially what it means to create content. It ain't about how long it takes, meaning you ain't trying to make something that's going to take hours and hours and hours. If people are trying to post daily, if you're trying to post daily, you want to be able to create your content rather quickly. That's what it means to be the master builder. So you are able to manipulate things so that you can get things done quickly, so that you can be doing things daily. So you say daily content. Before you can do daily content, you must understand how to manipulate technology. Before you can understand how to manipulate technology, the third eye must be sparked. That opens up your consciousness to realize that that's even a probability at all. And then you evolve into the 33, where you can share your sound with your voice. Now the content creation, now it evolves to you actually speaking. Because you see, it's one thing you can say create memes. You got people that create memes. You got people that create content that doesn't require them to actually speak, because it's more visual, or it's more about words. Some people prefer like Twitter, or some people just prefer putting photography up. So you may see them, but you may not actually hear their voices. So that's the difference between the 22 and the 33. The 33, you actually hear a person's voice versus just looking at their content. And I'm just using this as an example. I'm just bringing it up into modern times, because these are ancient ideas. But again, you're not gonna read any book and it's telling you what I'm telling you right now, because we have to update this, and it can only be updated when you know it inside out. So that's all I essentially do. All I'm doing is updating these ancient ideas to fit into the 21st century, the age of technology, the information age. I'm just updating all these things so that we can relate it to our here and now. And we don't have to speak about these things like it's still the year 1600 or something. So we're bringing these ideas that have been here forever, and we're updating it to the 21st century so that we see ourselves within it. So again, you're not going to see nowhere where it says Master 22 makes you a content creator, and 11 represents opening the third eye to even acknowledge it. That's just something I came up with as I'm speaking about it. Because I can see these things play out. That's what it means to be the 11. You can see these things playing out. I can see it playing out in front of me. I'm just describing things I see in front of me, not in front of my physical eyes, but the internal. So that's the difference between the 22 and the 33. One is actually based on you can actually hear and even see a person versus just looking at their content and not being able to see. Then you go into the 44. Because when you go to the 44 again, that's going beyond the influencer. You're going beyond, trying to get followers. Because you understand, if you're actually healing people, you don't have to pay for ads like other people. See, other people, like when you have a product and you're trying to get the product out to the people, you need advertisement so that people become aware of your product. That's really the only way they're going to become aware of it, if they see it on some type of advertisement. If they never seen it, if they never seen the advertisement, they wouldn't know it exists. You have to do that when you're pushing a product that people really don't need. It's just something to spend money on. Which is what most people do. Most products that people push, it's not something people actually need. It's just something to spend their money on. Because if you was giving people what they actually needed, like I said before, you wouldn't need ads. Because you would have word of mouth. You're like, yo, this person actually healed me. They're going to tell everybody they know. Yo, this person is a real deal. Now everybody they know is coming to you, and everybody they know is coming. So it's like it's going to be very quick before the word gets out that you know what the fuck you're actually doing, and you're doing it to where it's affordable to everybody. You can say, yeah, that's being like Christ, right? But in order to be like Christ, you see, we gotta put down the titles. We can't get caught into the superficial, because that's going to come later. That comes after you show and prove your mastery of what you can actually do. And you are the supreme master, because again, you're not even charging people for it. Because you realize, like, oh, I can actually, I can make money in different ways. It doesn't have to be through this way. Like if I'm trying to heal people, I should be trying to get to as many people as I can. I shouldn't be trying to just work with a certain denomination of people. If this is truly about healing, it should be available to everyone. That's essentially what cryptocurrency is. That was the idea behind cryptocurrency, to give everybody a fair shot. Because we know that this system is rigged. If you don't know certain people in certain places, then, just certain things you're not going to be able to do. Certain places you're just not going to be able to go. Certain things are just invitation only, in other words. If you know the right person, then you can get things done. Some things can only be done by invitation. Like some clubs and some societies are invitation only, meaning the only way somebody new can come into the fold is through somebody who's already there. Meaning you have to be introduced to it from somebody who's already there. You can't ask them. They got to ask you, in other words. You don't get to come up to them and say, I want to be this. No, they have to ask you. They have to watch you and observe you and come to the conclusion that, oh, you may be a fit for this before you're even considered. So we'll wrap it up about 5 minutes. We'll make it an even hour. So I just wanted to emphasize what it means to be a free thinker, not just, utilize the numerology with it, 11, 22, 33, 44. To be free in your thinking means you are able to provide some type of free service, something that costs nothing. But that's actually priceless. Imagine that. You charge nothing for something that's priceless, and we know health is priceless. Your health is priceless. So when someone is able to provide a healing service, something that's priceless, that you will pay any amount for, and they actually are doing what they said that they can do. Again, as we know, this is like talking about a mythological creature, right? These people are not in abundance. You're not going to really run into these motherfuckers. Why? Because most people are stuck on the 33rd degree. So that's why I keep acknowledging the 44th degree, because most people are stuck on the 33rd. Because they see that as a highest aspiration. To be the master mason, which is operative masonry. You're no longer speculating about things. That's 11. 11 just makes you skeptical about life. So you go through your, you go through your 11th degrees. That's your degrees of speculation. When you're like, things are not how they appear to be. So when you were young and you were very skeptical about church, religion, life, school, whatever it may be, you were just very skeptical. Like, this is not what it appears to be. There's something off. That's you going through your 11th degree. You begin to speculate about things, which then leads you on a journey towards the 22, which is being the master builder. And the builder takes place first within the consciousness. Before you actually start building anything physically, you have built a consciousness because you have been speculating on what the truth may possibly be, because it's not what you think it is. So that's all speculative. You're speculating on what the truth may be. You become the master builder when you acknowledge what the truth is. Now it's no longer what it may be. Now you came to the conclusion of what the truth is. And your consciousness first and foremost. And then from that state of knowing what the truth is, then you become operative in that truth. You begin to manifest that truth. You begin to live your life in accordance to that truth, those conclusions that you have arrived at, which again leads you to the 33rd degree, the master masonry. Now you're able to teach. Now you're able to make people like you. Now you're able to duplicate yourself, as we were speaking about earlier, which is for most people, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to be influencers. They want to duplicate themselves. They want to be in a room where everybody is the same. Everybody's like them. Because at the 33rd degree, you're able to do so. However, when you go to the 44th degree, now you're no longer in a room with people that you have created. Now you have to be in a room full of different people with different ideologies and different ways of life, and find a common thread between them all. Meaning, before you ever put your hands on anybody, they can see and sense your consciousness. Like, yo, you actually, have respect and honor for my culture, for my tradition, before you even did anything for me. This is why it starts with the consciousness. So you already acknowledge them, consciousness to consciousness, before you even do anything for them. Just letting it know that this is a level of respect first and foremost. And this is the difference between, you can say, Masonry and Freemasonry. Because you have Masonry, then you have Freemasonry, which you can say is like plus degrees. When you're more Freemason, that means you acknowledge other things outside of Masonry. You are going beyond what it means to be a master Mason. Now you're going to a Freemason. Now you can add on. Now you can create temples or lodges. Now you can add on to the degrees and customize it. So if you feel that something should be done more efficiently, you can add the updates to it. So that's why the 44th degree represents, once you have updated the format, which is your consciousness, once you have updated your consciousness to be able to comprehend each and everybody who comes before you, and not duplicate yourself, but to maximize their godhood. Again, now you're not creating duplicates of yourself. Now you're creating spiritual beings that are other than yourself, because you are helping them to acknowledge them, not to acknowledge you, for them to acknowledge them, because only if they acknowledge themselves can they truly acknowledge you. So you already know that. What's up, Matthew? And this would be the final point. You already know that. You already know, if I truly want to get someone to acknowledge who I am, I must get them to acknowledge themselves. Because once they acknowledge themselves, they're going to, oh, okay, you're here too. Oh, shit, okay, we're on the same plane here. Okay, we're thinking on the same level. Oh, okay. As opposed to if you are always a step above them, you can see the equality in the consciousness. So that's why you go beyond the influence. I'm an influencer and I have influence over people. You like, I don't give a fuck about influencing anybody. I just want you to acknowledge your own truth. Fuck, you don't have to acknowledge mine. Acknowledge yours. Because it's only when you acknowledge yours that you can truly acknowledge mine. So that's why you don't come with your truth through the door. Because in order for them to even understand what I'm talking about, they got to understand what they're talking about. Because once they understand what they're talking about and they realize we're talking about the same thing, just in a different format, then they can acknowledge, okay, it is the same. But they can only acknowledge the similarities if they acknowledge themselves first and their divinity, their divine demonic entities. That's essentially what it comes down to. You have to acknowledge your divine, which most people don't mind doing, but you must also acknowledge the demonic. Because you have to go into the demonic world to relate to other people that's opposite than you. You can be as divine as you want and acknowledge people that are similar to that. But again, we're not really helping these people. Basically, if everybody's angels, we're already angels. We're not helping each other to become angels. We're already angels. Versus, you go down to the pits of hell, and then you get a demon to not acknowledge your divinity, but to acknowledge how demonic they are and how they can find power in that demonic current, which can then be transmuted, if they choose, to acknowledge you. They can only acknowledge your supremacy once they acknowledge their own. Once they come into their own power, they can acknowledge, oh, okay, you're powerful in your world in your own right, like I'm powerful in mine. So I respect yours because you respect mine. Because you're not trying to invade in my space. You never try to tell me to change and to not be a demon. And due to that respect, they may actually acknowledge the angelic. Like, damn, it ain't that bad to be an angel. Let me make my way up the levels. Then they become a Lucifer. They become the torchbearer. Now they know the mysteries of heaven and hell instead of just knowing about heaven or just knowing about hell. So they become universal, which is the point. And vice versa. Coming from the demonic world, going into the angelic. Showing them their supremacy, which helps them to acknowledge your supremacy. And they're like, okay, let me actually go down there. Oh, hell is not what I thought it was. Let me actually go see for myself, and let me get some training down there. Now they become a master of the higher and the lower instead of just the higher, just the low. So you see, like, we just don't fall for the separation tactics. One group is over here, another group is over there, and we're supposed to be separate. We're supposed to always be at odds. This is how you dissolve all that. Because if we go according to the program, we're always supposed to be at odds with each other. It's going to always be white versus black. It's going to always be light skin versus dark skin. It's going to always be this bullshit. If we keep falling for the traps, if we keep falling for the okie doke. Till we realize, like, oh, okay, let me show you how we are the same instead of showing you how we are different. Let me show you how we come from the same origin, even though our skin tones are completely different. Or let me show you how all of our consciousness can come to this divine principle. Irregardless of how we look. We look completely different, but we both had the ability to be godly, as well as we both had the ability to be devilish. The skin tone is just an outward appearance. The race, the ethnicity, all these are outer appearances to get us to believe that we're different. And it has been successful. We use the littlest things to separate ourselves from others. The smallest things, short hair, long hair, somebody's tall, somebody's short. We use the simplest things to separate. And then it kind of gets more serious with religion and politics and all that. Once we get into those worlds, and it gets a little bit more serious. That's essentially what we hear about on the mainstream. So on the mainstream, it's just what separates us politically and religiously and culturally. Then on the personal level, it's about the personal differences. But as we see, the highest level is the universal level where we can see the similarities. So we're not paying attention to the differences, we pay attention to the similarities. Oh, we're actually more alike than different. But the only way I'm going to get somebody else to acknowledge that is to acknowledge their divinity. Instead of trying to show them how divine I am. That's why you don't hear me. I don't never come on here talking about how godly I am. Or you need to refer to me as God. Fuck all that. All I say is 93. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. Then I just go in. And anybody who gives me the respect, I'll give you that same respect right back. I'm not greater or lesser. And it goes both ways. That's why I come and I do this. I always show up. That's just me acknowledging that I'm not the only one out here. I need to actually speak. I can be as high and supreme as I want, but unless others can acknowledge their own supremacy, then what good am I doing? That's why they say God created. It's one thing to be divine, but then you're alone. You can say you're alone by your goddamn self. What fun is that? Versus like, oh, I need to actually not elevate myself any higher. I need to elevate others. Because if I just keep elevating myself higher and higher and higher and higher, now I'm so far away from others that we can't even relate to each other no more. Now it becomes, okay, I don't even want to deal with certain type of people or certain type of group. Now we completely cut ourselves off from everything. When we can be merging together and we become powerful as one. When we separate, all we're going to do is prolong the inevitable. So since we have the ability to manipulate time and to speed up time, we can reach the inevitable before others. The inevitable is everybody is universal. We acknowledge ourselves from a global consciousness. You can get there way before others. And again, that's why cryptocurrency and all that, it's just some people are able to get to these conclusions before others, and then slowly but surely other minds begin to acknowledge it, like, oh, okay, this cryptocurrency, even though, and I'm mentioning cryptocurrency, which is not doing well, but that's not the point as to why it's here. Meaning, if you are a person that's worried about whether Bitcoin is 20,000 or 40,000 or 60,000, you're missing the point as to why Bitcoin exists. Because Bitcoin will never be zero, so it really don't matter what the price is anyway. It only matters to you if you're trying to get rich off of it. You're trying to just do a quick flip, but that's not why it exists. If you go back to the original purpose of why cryptocurrency was created, it was to give everybody a shot. So now you don't have to go through these banks and these institutions who only want to acknowledge these small things. And with that, bear peace. 93, 93, 93.